The dust carried the scent of ozone and forgotten storms, heavy with the taste of metal and old regrets. Each step Kalen Vaynar took sent an echo down the corridors of the dead station, hollow and endless, like footsteps in a cathedral of ghosts. His breath fogged in the frigid air, small clouds that clung to the walls before fading, leaving behind frost that glittered faintly under the station's emergency glow. He had walked through many ruins before, but none carried the weight of this place. The moon it rested on had been stripped of life long ago, left to orbit in silence around a nameless planet. Yet Kalen wasn't here for the silence. He was here for its finality. The outpost had once been a military installation, built to outlast siege and storm, but now its bulkhead sagged, its doors half open like broken jaws. He paused at one, drawn into a long barracks chamber where bunk frames lined the walls. Dust coated every surface, but what caught his eye was the rough carving etched into the metal of a lower bunk: Valdez, back soon. Kalen's chest tightened. The words were crude, but they carried the force of memory. His vision blurred, and suddenly he wasn't standing in the ruins. He was back on the troop transport, days before the fall of Orion 7. Private Jairo Valdez, only 19, had shown him a flickering hollow of a newborn child, her eyes impossibly wide, her laugh a bubble of joy against the background hum of engines. "She's perfect," Kalen had told the boy, and meant it. "Name's Selena. When I get back, I'll show her how to fight, how to be strong." Kalen had promised him, promised all of them, that they would return. That promise had been broken in fire and betrayal when Commander Darius Kale withdrew support, chasing artifacts instead of protecting his soldiers. 23 had died screaming, and Kalen had lived to remember every face. His hand traced the dust-filled letters again, trembling. He had not come to this place to mourn, not entirely. He had come to answer. The deactivation key in his pocket felt like a stone against his thigh, heavy, tarnished brass etched with symbols no one remembered how to read. A relic he had purchased in the shadow markets of Kepler Station. It was more than a key, it was his sentence. He forced himself out of the barracks. The station seemed to breathe around him, its metal bones groaning as though aware of his presence. The path drew him toward the medical bay, its faded red cross still visible above the doorway. He didn't know why he entered. Perhaps he was chasing one last fragment of humanity. Inside, everything was dark except for a single terminal still clinging to a whisper of power. Its screen blinked with a waiting message, the final log of the outpost's medical officer. Dr. Mira Solane. Day 847 of siege. The others have gone deeper, but I remain. Even the patients in stasis must not be left without a watcher. The Ark grows restless, it dreams, and in its dreams, I hear voices. If you find this, know we didn't run. We became part of something greater. The Ark lives, and so do we, within it. Kalen read the words twice. A century old, yet alive with the conviction of someone who had chosen duty over escape. He wondered if Myra's choice had been noble or if she, like him, had simply reached the end of her endurance. The corridors beyond the medbay bent toward the command center. There, through armored glass, the black infinity of space waited, its stars cold and patient. He imagined them watching, unblinking, as if mocking his intent. Survivors had rebuilt their homes, yet here he was, seeking oblivion. He entered the command chamber slowly, boots leaving trails in the thick dust. The main terminal sat silent, humming faintly as if in its sleep. He drew the brass key from his pocket, feeling its weight settle into his palm. Warm now from his skin, it pulsed with his heartbeat. "This is it," he muttered. His voice cracked like brittle glass. The last door. He raised the key toward the interface. Just before it touched the slot, the console flared with sudden life. A single word glowed across the screen in pale blue light. "Sleeping." Kalen froze. The word throbbed on the display as though aware of him. His hand dropped instinctively to the blaster holstered at his side. The weapon hummed when he drew it, comforting in its familiarity. He scanned the chamber, senses straining. "Who's there?" His words scraped from a throat gone dry. At first, silence answered. Then a voice, soft as a sigh, drifted from the shadows. "You're not the first to come here looking for silence." The tone was melodic, accented in a way Kalen couldn't place. Feminine. And unbearably sad. "Show yourself." A figure stepped into the half-light. She moved like memory-given form, slender, cloaked in the remnants of a technician's jumpsuit. But what stopped Kalen cold was her skin, a pale, luminous violet that caught the dim emergency glow and seemed to radiate with its own inner fire. Her features were too symmetrical for human chance, high cheekbones, eyes large and dark, carrying depths that felt older than the station itself. A thin scar ran along her cheek like a silver thread, grounding her beauty in something real. "I am Naira," she said, her voice calm, almost tender. "And you are in pain." Kalen's weapon remained trained on her. "This place is mine. I paid for it. Leave." Naira looked at the blaster as though it were a curious toy, not a threat. She stepped closer, her gaze steady. "You paid for walls. For stone and steel. But not for this." Her hand brushed a dormant panel. At her touch, lights awakened, consoles humming as if stirred from centuries of slumber. The air shimmered. Kalen staggered as the floor vibrated beneath his boots, his lungs filling with air that was suddenly thicker, richer, laced with scents he did not recognize. The command center dissolved into a living world. A violet sky burned overhead, winds carrying the tang of alien seas. Kalen felt the gravity shift, his body adapting as though he had lived there all his life. "This is Thalos," Naira whispered. Her skin glowed brighter in resonance with the simulated environment. "A world lost to its star, preserved here in perfect memory. Every breath you take is its echo." Kalen turned in stunned silence as the vision shifted again. Now they were submerged in an ocean that wasn't water but something heavier, yet he breathed easily. Bioluminescent creatures drifted past, their light forming patterns that hinted at meaning. "The Serati," Naira continued, reverence in her voice. "They thought in colors, spoke in symphonies of light. When their world collapsed, they chose to live on in memory. The illusions faded, returning them to the cold command center, but the sense of enormity lingered. You see," Naira said, stepping closer, "the Ark doesn't keep relics. It keeps lives. Entire worlds, every note of their songs, every breath of their winds. Not a museum, but a womb for rebirth." Kalen's grip on the blaster loosened, though he didn't lower it. The ache in his chest, the promise broken, the soldiers lost, pressed harder than ever. "This place wasn't meant to die with you," she whispered. Her eyes searched his. "It was meant to live with us." The brass key in his hand felt heavier than before. Not an end. Perhaps something else. He wasn't sure if he hated her for saying it, or if part of him wanted desperately to believe. Kalen leaned against the cold metal of the console, his pulse still racing. Naira stood only a few paces away, her violet skin glowing faintly as though echoing the pulse of the Ark itself. The brass key, still heavy in his hand, seemed less like a weapon now and more like a question. Her presence filled the room in a way the silence never had. She wasn't just another survivor, not some scavenger clinging to scraps. No, she belonged here. That certainty rolled off her in every deliberate movement, in the way the dormant system stirred awake at her touch. "What are you?" Kalen finally asked. His voice was quieter than he intended, as though afraid of the answer. Naira's dark eyes, wide and luminous, held his without flinching. "I am the Ark's keeper. Not its master. Not its prisoner. A bridge between its memory and its will." She drifted back to the controls, her fingers brushing across long-dead panels. Lights rose where she touched, soft and hesitant at first, then steady. Around them, the command center dissolved once more into something impossible. Kalen staggered as the floor vibrated beneath his boots, the air thickening, warm breezes brushing against his skin. He was no longer standing on metal decking but on rich soil alive with scents he couldn't name. The chamber had become a living world, one that pulsed with energy and motion. "This is Kethra," Naira said softly, her voice almost reverent. "The last memory before its sun collapsed into a black hole. The Ark remembers not only the people, but the entire pattern of their existence, gravity, atmosphere, even the way light curved in their skies." Kalen crouched, running his hand through the soil. It crumbled like the real thing, rich and dark, leaving residue on his palm. For a moment, he forgot his ghosts, the weight of the key, even the silence he had come here to embrace. Then the vision shifted again. They were standing in a translucent medium, thick as water but breathable. Around them drifted creatures so alien his mind struggled to comprehend them. Vast ribbons of light moving in symphonic patterns, each curve and pulse carrying meaning. "The Serati Deep Cities," Naira explained. "A collective mind that dreamed in poetry. They chose to upload themselves here when their world faltered. Every thought, every song, preserved." Kalen reached out instinctively. His hand passed through a luminous trail, sending a tingle up his arm, as though brushing against a memory that wasn't his own. "How many?" he whispered. 17,000 species. 437 civilizations. Naira's voice carried both awe and sorrow. Each with its own meaning for life. Each still alive in memory. The vision faded, leaving them back in the cold command chamber. The silence returned, but it no longer felt empty. It was filled with possibility. Kalen gripped the key harder, his knuckles white. "You're telling me this place isn't just a graveyard?" Naira stepped closer, her gaze steady. "It's a seed. Waiting." For the first time in years, something stirred inside Kalen that wasn't bitterness or grief. But before he could answer, the Ark itself seemed to convulse. The floor shuddered violently. Warning lights blazed across every panel, flashing symbols in languages Kalen couldn't read. Naira stiffened, her hands flying over the consoles as data scrolled faster than even his soldiers' eyes could follow. "What's happening?" he demanded, bracing himself against the trembling deck. "Error cascade," Naira hissed, her voice fraying at the edges. Her bioluminescence flickered like a candle in a gale. "The Ark thinks we are contamination. It's activating conservation protocol." Kalen's stomach dropped. "What does that mean?" Her head snapped toward him, and for the first time he saw fear in those ageless eyes. "It means it will try to preserve us. By freezing us into its collection." Almost immediately, the air thinned. Frost began crawling up the walls. The temperature plummeted, his breath turning to clouds that crystallized before his face. Heavy blast doors slammed shut around the chamber, sealing them inside. The consoles screamed warnings in every tongue, but the words that repeated again and again chilled him more than the dropping air. Deep conservation mode initiated. Estimated duration, 1,000 years. Kalen's hand found Naira's shoulder. She was trembling, her eyes flickering between human recognition and lines of code. When she spoke again, her voice carried two tones, hers and the Ark's. "The system thinks we're under attack. It wants to protect us by adding us to the archive. Ours, Kalen. We have only ours." Already his breath came shallow, his lungs burning in the thinning air. His soldiers' faces pressed at the edge of his mind, their last cries, their shattered hopes. He had come here to join them in death. But not like this. "What do we do?" he asked, his voice harsh, ragged. Naira's gaze burned with urgency, flickering light tracing patterns under her skin. "We have to wake the Ark's heart. Restart the primary matrix before it finishes its preservation sequence. If we fail, we'll become memories, frozen echoes like the rest. Kalen clenched the brass key in his fist until its edges cut into his skin. The weight of his choice pressed down heavier than ever. For the first time, dying felt simple compared to what Naira was asking. But her eyes, those endless, violet-lit eyes, held him, refusing to let him turn away. "We fight," Kalen said finally, his voice steady despite the ice in his veins. "We fight, or we're nothing more than ghosts." And together, they plunged into the labyrinth of failing systems, racing against the ark itself. The station's corridors had become death traps. Frost clung to the walls like lacework, glittering in the faint glow of backup lights. Kalen's breath rasped in his helmet, each inhale thin and ragged, as though the ark itself were already tugging him toward stillness. Naira moved ahead of him, her pale violet glow flickering in uneven pulses. Her neural link to the ark was fragmenting, sometimes her steps faltered, her head jerking as machine code syllables slipped from her lips. Yet she pressed forward, a ghost racing against her own unraveling. "The ark's heart lies in two places," she told him during a lucid moment, her voice trembling. "The primary reactor, and the auxiliary control matrix. They must awaken together, or nothing will hold." "How far apart?" Kalen asked, forcing his numbed fingers to tighten around the blaster. 3 kilometers, she whispered. "We'll need to split. Only synchronicity will wake it. If we're off by even a breath," her voice fractured, syllables splintering into static before she forced them back into words. "Fusion breach. We'll be erased." Kalen met her eyes. They burned with two lights, hers, fragile and desperate, and the ark's, vast and cold. He reached for her hand. It was ice against his glove, yet alive. "Then we trust each other." For a heartbeat she smiled, though her lips trembled. "Trust is all we have left." They parted at the junction. Kalen dropped into a maintenance shaft barely wide enough for his shoulders. Ice coated the rungs, his gloves slipping as he descended into the frozen veins of the station. Somewhere in the dark, he could feel the ark's pulse, uneven, like a heart in fibrillation. Every few meters, he encountered sealed bulkheads. Some he pried open with brute force, others forced him to crawl through service conduits where shards of frost cut at his arms. His lungs ached, every breath heavier than the last. Yet he kept moving, carrying the weight of the brass key in his pocket and the thought of Naira's fragile smile. Meanwhile, Naira faced her own labyrinth. The station's defensive drones had awakened, blinded by panic protocols. Their targeting lasers swept the corridors in mindless arcs, treating every movement as threat. She wove through them like smoke, her connection to the arc allowing her to sense their patterns before they fired. Still, the effort tore at her. Each evasion left her dimmer, her glow faltering as though she were being consumed by the machine she guided. By the time she reached Sector 7, the auxiliary control room looked like a crystalline cathedral. Towers of quantum processors shimmered in the cold, each containing the memory of a civilization. The air was so frigid that every inhale stabbed her lungs, her breath crystallizing into shards that fell like glass. Her trembling hands brushed the controls. They were delicate beyond imagining, structures that existed in dimensions her human senses could barely touch. She closed her eyes, forcing her consciousness to stretch, to split, to merge with the fractal logic of the Arkansas. Pain screamed through her skull, but she held on. Kalen stumbled into the reactor chamber at nearly the same moment. The room was alive with danger, plasma barriers shimmered across the consoles, deadly arcs ready to vaporize flesh. The ark wasn't defending itself from outsiders. It was defending its heart from him. He spotted an override panel 3 meters away, glowing faintly behind its own barrier. His training provided the solution instantly: overload the generator by feeding it raw power. The only available conduit was alive with current, enough to kill a man twice over. Kalen stared at it, then at his scarred hands. So be it. He ripped the conduit free. Electricity slammed into him like molten iron. His muscles locked, his vision whited out, but through the agony he forced his body forward, slamming the surge into the generator. The plasma barriers flickered and died. He collapsed against the controls, every nerve screaming, and forced his half-numb fingers to begin the startup sequence. At the same instant, Naira plunged deeper into the matrix. She had no choice left but to merge herself with the Ark's panic. It struck her like a storm of lightning made of thought, shredding the edges of her identity. Fragments of machine speech poured from her lips, her body convulsing under the feedback. Yet she pressed her hands against the crystalline core, channeling her essence into the alignment. Quantum lattices unfolded, fragile as spider silk, demanding perfect balance. Kalen's blood sizzled in his veins as he slammed the final command into the reactor console. "Now, Naira," he gasped, though she was 3 kilometers away. Somehow, he felt her hear him. Her fingers moved in a blur, tracing impossible geometries across the quantum matrices. For one breathless instant, her entire being fractured into shards of light. Then, the Ark roared awake. Controlled fusion ignited in the reactor chamber, white light bathing Kalen in brilliance. Across the station, dead systems stirred like a patient roused from a coma. Consoles flickered, life support wheezed uncertainly, corridors trembled with the rush of energy returning after centuries of silence. Naira collapsed against the control dais, her left arm scorched black where she had touched the core directly to stabilize it. Her blood wasn't entirely blood anymore, threads of pale light shimmered through the burns, pulsing in rhythm with the Ark's restored heartbeat. Kalen found her minutes later, barely conscious, her body shivering but alive. He cradled her against him, fumbling for medical supplies. Her sacrifice dwarfed his. He had endured pain. She had risked her very self, fusing flesh with machine, identity with infinity. When she opened her eyes at last, they glowed with a depth he had never seen. She was still Naira, but she was also more, a living bridge between the Ark's vast memory and human heart. Her voice was faint but resonant, harmonics vibrating through the walls themselves. "Thank you, Kalen." Before he could reply, a new sound split the chamber. The shriek of plasma cutters biting into hull armor. Voices over the comms, cold and familiar, slithered into the command center. "Hello, Vaynar," said the voice he had dreaded for years. Calm, cultured, carrying the same arrogance that had doomed 23 soldiers. Darius Kale had come. The sound of plasma cutters gnawed at the Ark's hull like hungry insects, sharp and insistent, echoing through the command center. Kalen stiffened. That voice, the one dripping with authority, arrogance, and betrayal, was unmistakable. "Darius," he breathed, his fists clenching until his knuckles went white. The speakers crackled, carrying his enemy's voice throughout the station. "I wondered where you crawled off to die, Vaynar. When my contacts told me you bought a deactivation key and vanished into the void, I knew it was only a matter of time before I found you. Imagine my delight when the trail led me to a Forerunner rally." Kalen's stomach twisted. The betrayal of Orion 7 still burned in his memory, his men left to die, support ships withdrawn, while Darius chased the lure of alien technology. Now here he was again, laughing, as if the galaxy itself conspired to replay Kalen's worst nightmare. On the monitors, security feeds flickered to life, showing the silhouette of a vessel clawing at the Ark's hull. The Rustborn, Darius's scavenger ship, bristled with cutters, salvage arms, and weapon pods cannibalized from wars long past. The same vessel that had fled Orion 7 while soldiers screamed for backup. Beside Kalen, Naira stirred. Though weakened, her bioluminescent veins pulsed with the Ark's rhythm, her awareness tethered now to something greater than herself. She studied Kalen's ashen face, then the screens. "Your ghosts still bind you," she murmured, her voice carrying strange harmonics. "But this battle is not only yours. It is the Ark's." The speakers flared again. "You always were predictable, Vaynar," Darius mocked. Bleeding heart, clinging to the past. That's why your men died, because you lacked the will to make the hard call. Don't worry, I'll finish what Orion 7 started. I'll strip this place clean and add its power to my fleet. And you? You'll die knowing you failed twice. The screens lit with a sudden blaze, a holographic battlefield, projected with sick precision into the command center. Kalen flinched. It was Orion 7, reconstructed in flawless detail. He watched Valdez fall again, plasma searing through his chest. Watched 19-year-old eyes widen with betrayal as the promised support never arrived. Kalen staggered under the weight of it, his breath coming in ragged gasps. His vision blurred. The battlefield smelled of ozone and blood, the screams of his men crashing over him like surf. Naira saw him falter. With sudden force, she slammed her hand onto the main console. The arc surged through her, pouring resonance into the comm systems. The holograms shattered into static, dissolving into shards of false light. Enough, she said, her voice layered with the authority of something ancient. The speakers vibrated under her command, silencing the ghosts. For the first time, Darius's tone wavered. Impressive. The station has a guardian, I see. No matter. My crew will breach within minutes. Then we'll negotiate on my terms. There will be no terms, Naira replied evenly. Her glow brightened until her outline blurred, the arc's power resonating through her veins. You are not welcome here. A harsh laugh crackled back. Welcome? I'm not asking permission. This station represents energy and technology beyond imagining. It's mine now. And as for you, Vaynar, the voice sharpened into venom. Some debts require collection. Kalen drew his blaster, jaw set. His past had cornered him, and there was no running left. The Ark's defenses, he demanded. Can they stop him? Naira's expression darkened. Yes, but at a price. Weapons demand power. We can route it from life support or from the quantum beacon. She gestured to a console glowing faintly. The beacon is our only way to contact the other arcs, to awaken them. If we fire weapons, the signal dies. If we send the signal, we stand defenseless. Darius's voice cut through again, oily and cruel. Touching, your little farewell. Don't worry, I'll be gentle with the alien. My crew has needs, after all. His laugh was obscene, echoing through the chamber. The words detonated inside Kalen like a plasma bolt. Rage flooded him, hotter than the cold air. For years he had carried only guilt, only despair. Now fury gave his limbs strength, his heart purpose. You want me to hold them off while you send the signal? He asked Naira, his voice low, controlled. Yes, she said, meeting his gaze. Her eyes carried both mortal fragility and the Ark's infinite weight. Kalen thought of Valdez, of promises broken, of soldiers who never came home. He thought of Naira's scar, her pale violet skin glowing against the dark, her willingness to sacrifice everything for life instead of death. I've stood alone before, he said, holstering his blaster with steady hands. But this time it matters. No, Naira said suddenly. Fierce, certain. She extended her hand. The key. Kalen's instinct screamed to guard it, but something deeper, older, urged him to trust. Slowly, he placed the brass relic into her palm. The moment it touched her skin, it flared with light, the ancient etchings burning alive with the same glow that flowed through her veins. Symbols appeared on the consoles, carved into the very walls, as though the Ark were remembering itself. The key was never meant for endings, Naira whispered. Her voice layered with resonance, echoing across the chamber. It was meant for awakening. She slid the key into a crystalline chamber hidden beneath the console. It fit perfectly, not just in shape but in meaning. When she turned it, light erupted, structured and alive, cascading across the room in fractal patterns. On the main screen, star maps bloomed, a web of light stretching across the galaxy. 17 other nodes flared awake, answering the call like sleepers stirred from a long dream. A voice, ancient yet fresh, spoke through Naira. Network authentication confirmed. Preservation Protocol Omega initiated. Welcome to the Consciousness Archive. Outside, the Rustborn shuddered. Space itself warped around it as the Ark's true defense revealed itself, not plasma cannons, not missiles, but the rewriting of probability. The scavenger ship dissolved into quantum haze, its matter gently dismantled, catalogued, preserved. Darius's final transmission wasn't a scream, but a bewildered whisper. "What are you?" Then silence. Not destruction, preservation. His crew, his ship, carefully removed from existence and folded into memory. The Ark's awakening spread outward, light spanning the galaxy. Naira stood in its center, radiant, her body a living bridge between human soul and galactic memory. She turned to Kalen, her voice now carrying the weight of countless civilizations. The great work begins again. Not preservation. Resurrection. Kalen looked at the map of stars, each one a promise, each one a chance to restore what had been lost. The ghosts of Orion 7 no longer accused him. They stood with him, counselors instead of tormentors. "Where first?" he asked. Naira's fingers traced the light. Kepler 442b. The colonists their dream ancestral songs they cannot name. With guidance, they could awaken an empire. Kalen nodded. For the first time in years, his path wasn't toward silence. It was toward purpose. "I'll go," he said. "You won't be alone," Naira whispered. "The network binds us. Wherever you walk, I'll be there." He squeezed her hand, feeling not only her pulse but the Ark's infinite heartbeat. "Then let's begin." And that's where Kalen Vaynar's story shifts from death into rebirth, where despair transforms into destiny. He came to the Ark seeking silence, an ending. Instead, he found Naira, a pale violet guardian bound to something greater, and together they reawakened a network spanning the stars. Darius Kale, the betrayer of Orion 7, thought he could strip life for profit. Instead, he became another preserved echo, proof that the Ark's purpose was never death but transformation. Now 17 Arks stir across the galaxy, each carrying entire worlds in their memory, waiting for guardians to bring them back into the light. Kalen's mission is only beginning, and so is the story of those who will carry the great work forward. It makes you wonder, if you had the choice, would you become a keeper of the past, or a midwife to the rebirth of civilizations? Would you stand alone in silence, or step into the endless song of memory and future? If you've followed this journey all the way to the end, thank you. Stories like this one live because of dreamers like you, people who believe that even in the darkest ruins, hope can be rekindled. So if this tale moved you, if Kalen and Naira's fight lit even a small spark inside, do me a favor, hit that subscribe button. Share this video with someone who needs a story of redemption and resurrection. And leave a comment, tell me what civilization you would want preserved in the Ark. Because maybe, just maybe, the galaxy is listening.